Welcome back to Swayam's course on Jainism. In this lecture, in this seminar webinar, online course by Swayam, we will talk about environmental issues and Jain philosophy, Jain history, Jainism and ecology. When we think of ecology, we think of scientific reasons, scientific issues around ecology, environmental issues. What does Jainism have to do with ecology? That is what this lecture is going to unearth. So let's take a look. We discuss a little bit on Jain philosophy. Once again, very quick review. We will see some eco examples in Jain traditions, and we'll see what Jains are doing today, positive or negative. All right. Then, so we'll look at, first of all, we'll look at the contemporary Indian environment. Jain cosmology, ethics towards nature, we will take a look. Jain worldview and contemporary theories compared to Western philosophy. And Jain response to environmental issues, we'll take a look. So, today, as we know, in India and elsewhere in the world as well, there is an assault on land because of population explosion. There is loss of forest, lack of firewood, fodder, encroachment. Industrial pollution is comparable to what was happening in Pittsburgh in 1940s in the US. Urbanization is happening a little bit unplanned way also. Industrialization is happening across India. Large-scale projects are coming up, large dams, for example, Sardar Sarovar, Tehri Dam, and so on. And less proper rehabilitation of displaced is needed. River pollution is happening, which is comparable to what happened to the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, US in 1960s. There was fire in that river and so on, a lot of pollution. Population explosion and consumerism is happening. What we see here is the environmental issues can be seen as the 80-20 problem of the world, that 80% of the resources are used by 20% of the population across the world. And the 80% of the people face the consequences of high consumerism, high consumption of 20% of the people across the world. Something similar is happening in India as well. So now an alternative view on an Indian environmental issues is this by National Geographic magazine in the US conducted a survey called the Green Index survey from 2008, 2009, 10, 12, and 14. What they found is that, so for 5 years they did this survey. What they found was in 4 broad parameters of housing, transportation, food, and consumer goods. In all of these 4 parameters, as they compared world's largest economies in the US and Canada, Australia, China, European economies, and India, and Brazil also. They compared a lot of large economies. They found that Indians consistently came out to be the greenest compared to other countries. What they meant was that the carbon footprint of Indian economy or Indian civilization, India as a country, came out to be the lowest. So we have the lowest carbon footprint in India by Indians compared to many, many other countries, compared to China, Australia, European economies, and US, Canada, and Brazil, and so on. Why? Because even today in India, most of the houses do not have 24/7 air conditioning or heating or 24/7 hot water running, or houses are still very small compared to many other houses in the Euro-American economies. Appliances, use of appliances still very low. Dishwasher is still not found in Indian houses. So all these consumption habits are still very eco-friendly, keeps the carbon footprint of Indians still low. Second, our transportation habits in India, car ownership rates and average usage of motorized vehicles is still low compared to many other economies in the world. Length of daily commutes still depends on public transport. Utilization of public transport is very high for practical reasons, but also for cultural reasons. Food issues, so consumption of locally produced foods in India is still very high, which again keeps the carbon footprint low of Indians. And the relative consumption of bottled water, meat, and seafood in India is still less compared to many other economies of the world, according to National Geographic survey. Indians are still not that obsessed with consumer goods. Everyday consumption of big ticket items is still very low. So many of these reasons have kept the overall carbon footprint of Indians low. Especially if we look at the food issues, we find that the largest number of vegetarians exist today in India. We are not saying that all Indians are vegetarian, that's of course not true, but compared to other economy, compared to other countries, other cultures, we find here the consumption of vegetarian food is higher than many other countries in the world. So many of these cultural habits are, we can say that they are inspired by Hindu Jain ecological ideas. How? Actually, it was a phrase in the 1980s, 1970s. Economists used to deride Indian economy, calling it Hindu rate of growth. Compared to Thailand or Singapore or Hong Kong, which were called as Asian tiger, they were rapidly progressing, but Indian economy was walking with elephant pace. So they used to mock Indian economy, oh, it's a Hindu rate of growth. If we use that same phrase of Hindu rate of growth, here we can say it's a Hindu Jain environmental habits of Indians that have kept, these habits have kept the Indian overall carbon footprint lower than other countries in the world. What are those habits? How is it connected to Hinduism, Jainism, especially Jainism, because this course is on Jainism. Let's take a next look at the next slide. So Jainism says what? So again, to review Jain cosmology, Jain philosophy, Jain idea of the world, there is a Siddhaloka at the top where you reach after liberation. There are 8 heavens underneath the Siddhaloka. Then there is Manushaloka, the earth, which has 3 continents, 2 oceans, animals and humans are living on that earth, on the middle region. Then there are 7 hells under the earth. Then the living beings are all the souls that have consciousness, energy and bliss, right? And then non-living beings are the karma particle that get stuck to the soul and that pollute the soul. And then, so what it says, Jain cosmology, what it says is, one's present lifetime can be connected with somebody else's past or future. Other species that we see around us on the earth may have been reborn. Some of our ancestors may have been reborn in all these different kinds of species. So all the species are then interconnected through this idea of rebirth in Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism, especially in Jainism that we are talking about in this course. So then all the beings in the universe, all the beings on the earth are all interconnected and they are all equal. How? Next slide, I'll show you. All right, the next slide is that this slide is again a reminder that, but let's take a look at the last part of that slide, which I have discussed in the other presentation, that humans are equal to animals and other living beings. So for human consumption, if some other animal or a bird or even a reptile is hurt or killed, that's as good as cannibalism. That is as good as killing a fellow human being. So Jainism consistently for last 2 millennia, more than 2000 years, Jains have stayed away from consuming any kind of animal. Not even egg, not even chicken, nothing, no seafood, nothing. Because that is equal to killing a human being. So that Jain ethics for food and animal influenced Hinduism also and other overall Indians also. And so animal sacrifices that was highly prevalent in Vedic times was considerably reduced. So even today, Hindu rituals in some parts of India and Nepal, there are animals still sacrificed, such as in Bengal, in Nepal, in my own home state of Rajasthan. But that amount of animals being sacrificed is considerably reduced now, not as at large scale as it was happening before Mahavir's time or before Buddha's time. So this is the humble contribution coming from Jainism that changed ritual habits, Hindu habits and overall Indian habits and brought the consumption of meat to a very less extent. That brought down the overall carbon footprint of Indians also, as we see from Green Decks as conducted by National Geographic magazine. That was the idea. All right, next slide. All right. So once again, to summarize or review what Jain philosophy is of ahimsa, non-violence. So Jainism says that the greatest dharma for one's karma is inspired by ahimsa, non-violence. That means that violence committed to any living being, even an insect, even a reptile, even of course a mammal, every being in the universe wants to live. Nobody wants to be killed. So be non-violent, be compassionate, do not hurt anybody. By action, by speech, or by thinking. Be very non-violent and compassionate. Second major aid, so Jainism can be called as this AAA religion. These AAAs are ahimsa, aparigraha, and anekantvad. So ahimsa means doing no harm to our fellow beings in the universe. Aparigraha means non-accumulation. So that translates well for environmental ethics, keeping the carbon footprint low. Second, aparigraha, non-accumulation. also means non-accumulation of resources. So do not keep buying more and more consumerist items such as clothing or housing. Keep the housing size low, keep your carbon footprint low by not accumulating resources that are not needed for your immediate needs. So that translates to dharma for nature, again keeping the carbon footprint low. Then Anekantvad, the third A, which means non-one-sidedness. That translates well for environmental issues also by saying that there are many perspectives towards the environment. Humans do not have the monopoly on the environment. Animals were before us here and they have equal right, if not more, on the environmental resources. So if you're crossing, let's say, so on Indian roads, for example, if you're going on even on a highway, you might come across any kind of animal. People are supposed to stop for animals. There are signs posted across India, across Himalayas, for example, that I've seen, that this is the elephant corridor. Do not honk on animals. Let them cross. They have more right to use highway than human beings. So that coming from Anekantvad, as we see manifested on Indian roads also. There is a very famous paradigm of elephant being touched by 6 blind men. This story has now become like a worldwide story, but most likely it came originally from Jainism or other parts of India. So what happens is one blind man touches the trunk of the elephant and he thinks elephant is like a trunk. Somebody touches the tail of the elephant, thinks elephant is like a tail, and so on. So everybody has this partial view of reality. Nobody is completely wrong, nobody is completely right. That translates into Anekantvad, which means that everybody has these different perspectives towards the reality, towards the environment. So all views are to be respected. Elephants or animals have equal rights or different ways to connect with nature, to connect with ecology, and that has to be respected also. So anthropocentric or egocentric perspective should not be applied towards the environment. Instead of egocentric or anthropocentric, that is human-centric, we should adopt plurality of reality. That reality exists in these plural perspectives. And that is the ultimate reality, that the reality of plurality, that the multiple perspectives that exist in the world are all to be accepted and to be respected. And the nature or environment is for all people, all kinds of beings, not just for human beings. So these are the AAA that connect with ecological issues, environmental issues. All right, next slide. All right, so now the Tirthankaras, as we discussed in the previous lectures, the last major Tirthankar, 24th Tirthankar, which is translated into Ford maker, was Mahavir, and he was a contemporary of the Buddha. So different Tirthankaras have shown different examples, different legends about these Tirthankaras, how they respond to violence towards animals. So 22nd Tirthankar, for example, Neminath, his name was Neminath. He was going to get married, so there is this wedding procession going on. During the procession, he hears that many animals are going to be slaughtered, animal slaughter. So he responds to that animal slaughter and leaves his wedding in between, and out of compassion for animals, he takes renunciation and becomes a monk and does this extreme austerities and penance and so on, and eventually gets enlightenment. So that is the story of Neminath and how he became a Tirthankar inspired by animal cruelty. And then he spoke, of course, to stop that cruelty, and the entire message of Neminath and all other Tirthankaras have been to practice complete non-violence towards animals. Then the next one we see is Parshvanath. Parshvanath is always shown with this cobra head, as if some cobras, some snakes are protecting his meditation. He's 24/7, he's in this infinite meditation, he's in the Siddhalok, and the cobras are protecting him. Why? Because while he was meditating, actually before he started his meditation, he sees some snakes being burnt by somebody else. So out of compassion, he stops the violence towards that snake, and snake afterwards, out of his gratitude, always protects meditation of Parshvanath. That's Parshvanath's story and how he responded to the snake burning. Then Mahavir's example, the 24th Tirthankar, 600 BC, contemporary of the Buddha. As he is passing away, Jains believe that Mahavir passed away on Diwali day. As he is passing away, Mahavir hears an incident that somewhere some cattle are being slaughtered in some village. So his most chosen disciple, Indrabhuti, Mahavir immediately sends Indrabhuti and go and stop that slaughter. So even as he is passing away, he is aware, he is conscious about stopping this violence towards animals. So that's another example of animal compassion by Neminath, Parshvanath, and now Mahavir. Then Mahavir's statements that are recorded in Acharang Sutra. Acharang Sutra is one of the Shwetambar texts. Acharang Sutra. Acharang, conduct of Mahavir is recorded in this text. Acharang Sutra. So trees are inherently valuable. Mahavir said that more than 2,500 years ago, Mahavir said, trees are inherently valuable. What else he said? He said, vegetation has life just as humans. This statement, 2,500 years ago, modern science discovered life in trees only probably in last century or a couple of centuries, within the last couple of centuries. But Mahavir discovered consciousness, life in trees, in plants, more than 2 millennia back, more than 2 millennia ago. Then other texts in Jainism, Tattvarth Sutra, for example, Tattvarth Sutra, one of the major texts that we discussed also in the previous lecture. In that we find the statements such as, souls render service to one another. So interconnectedness, interdependence was celebrated, mentioned in this text called Tattvarth Sutra. All beings are interconnected, interdependent. Then in Dashavaikalik Sutra, another Shwetambar text, it is mentioned that humans should learn from the behavior of the bees. Bees, as they collect nectar from a flower, they do not harm the flower itself. They take very minimal nectar from each flower, combine all those nectars and create honey. What humans do, wherever they go, just plunder the forest and then build a new city. That's extremely wrong. We should learn from bees, take minimal from nature with extreme gratitude, be thankful, be grateful, and then take from nature instead of harming nature. Then from Adi Purana, another text which says forests are like saints. Plant tree for positive karmas. Plant more trees, says Adi Purana, more than 1,000 years ago. Now tree plantation is a major activity in many parts of India and other parts of the world. But Jains were saying, Jain texts were celebrating, we should plant more trees. So these are some of the environmental teachings, environmental examples that we see in Jain history and Jain texts. All right, next slide. All right. Then, so that was Tirthankaras and texts. Now Jain householders, intentionally, consciously, they avoid professions that are about harming environment, more violent professions that they will avoid consciously. So you will rarely see a Jain trading charcoal or timber, because that is direct harm to the environment. You will rarely see a Jain, probably never, Jains pulling a cart by animals, for example. They will avoid all those kind of professions, careers. You will not find Jains doing alcohol trade, ideally at least. There might be exceptions, of course. Slave trading was always avoided by Jains. Weapons trading, not to be done by Jains. Poison trading, not for Jain householders. Even sugar canes trading or seeds, growing sugar canes will be avoided by Jains because that involves more violence, agriculture and so on. Fire or firearms trading, anything to do with fire will be avoided, very direct violence. Even construction of lakes was avoided by Jains. Why? Because lakes are, if you are constructing a large lake, you will have to destroy a lot of trees, a lot of plants have to be removed, and you construct a lake. That again involves a lot of violence towards the trees. So that is also avoided by Jains, historically at least. Today there might be all kinds of exceptions, but historically at least, coming from Bhogopabhog Vrata, this text recommends that and prescribes that, and Jains historically practice that. What you do find Jains doing is trading with less tangible violence, banking, commercial activities, clerical activities Jains may do, diamond trade Jains have been doing for centuries, traditional medicines they have been involved with, they have been experts in arts and crafts, as we see from Jain temples across India and now across the world. You'll find Jains working for the government or working for rulers. You'll find Jains in manufacturing, which is textiles or machines. Publishing and media, many Jains have been leading those kind of industries, for example, Times of India. Then education, many Jains you'll find in education, publishing, writing, and so on. I'm not saying they are perfect. They also have some level of violence, but at least tangible violence that you see more in these kind of professions was historically avoided by Jains, and these kind of professions were preferred by Jains, historically at least. All right, next. We see, if we compare Jainism now, Jain philosophy, with Western philosophers such as Brian Swimme. Brian Swimme says that material objects lead to consumerism. Consumerism leads to depression. Probably we all have seen that or even experienced that more and more material objects, as we accumulate, it leads to more and more consumerism. It's kind of becomes an obsession. And if we don't get our desired objects, it may lead to depression. Right? Somebody else has better car, better phone, and I don't have that, and those kind of negative feelings. So that compares well with Jain aparigraha. Do not accumulate, do not be obsessed about objects or items, materialistic objects. Be detached from that and accumulate less of the environment's resources. Every object, every item comes at a great violence towards the environment, be it cell phone, be it a car, or anything that we consume for our daily usage. So avoid that violence, avoid accumulation of resources. Brian Swimme says also, it's coming from Brian Swimme also, Earth is alive and responds to our presence. That goes very well with Jainism's idea that Earth has soul, air has soul, fire has soul, water has soul, everything is alive because everything has soul. So that matches also with Jainism's idea of Earth is alive. Then Brian Swimme also says that we are all siblings. All the beings in the universe are all siblings because we all came out of Big Bang event that happened billions of years back. Right? Universal celebration of our origin. That makes us all siblings, that makes us all interconnected and interdependent. That also goes well with Jainism's idea of Jain respect for all jivas, creatures. All creatures are alive, nobody wants to be killed. So be compassionate, be respectful, and practice non-violence for all beings in the universe. Goes well with Jainism idea. All right, next one. Thomas Berry and David Abram. Let's see what they say. So what they say is, that world is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Do not treat anything as a dead object. Everything is a living subject, living agency they have. Even a chair, even a pen, according to Thomas Berry. That goes well with, again, Jain view of soul in all beings. Like I keep saying, earth, air, water, fire, everything has soul, everything has consciousness, everything is living being. Nothing is a dead object. Fire is also not dead object. Air also is living being. Compares well. Then David Abram said, diversity of local forms. Celebrate the diversity of thought, diversity of beings, diversity of perspectives, like we were discussing Anekantvad. So that goes well with Jain insistence on changing lifestyle. So transformation should happen bottom up, not top down. Not by making a rule, not by making a law, by transforming one's ethical views, by transforming one's thinking, that transformation should happen. So Mahavir for changing the minds, not forcing. Trees are inherently valuable for beauty and strength. So again, once again, celebrate the diversity in trees also. Then David Abram said, role of senses is equally important. Sense organs are equally important in recognizing diversity of environment. And that goes well with empiricism in Tattvarth Sutra by Uma Swati, that truth should be observed empirically by our senses, then we come to the conclusion, not by forcing anybody, by forcing from outside. Find your own truth, kind of a view. All right, next slide. Then let's take example of Gandhi and how Gandhi was inspired by these Jain ethical ideas and how his life can be seen as an ecological treatise. So Gandhi was inspired by the Jain guru Raj Chandra from 1891 to 95. Gandhi was in South Africa, and he wrote letters to this Jain guru Raj Chandra, and what he learned from Raj Chandra became his lifelong principles, Gandhi's lifelong principles, such as Satya, the truth, Ahimsa, non-violence, Aparigraha, simplicity, Brahmacharya, celibacy, Purusharth, self-reliance, and Upavas, austerities. How we see all those principles in Gandhi's life. Gandhi called his autobiography itself Satya Ke Prayog, my experiments with truth. His entire life he said, Satya is truth is God, God is truth. That was Gandhi's idea. Then Ahimsa, he was a practitioner of vegetarianism. His entire movement against the British were completely based on non-violence. Aparigraha, as soon as he comes back from South Africa, he renounces even his own clothing and he adopts this loincloth, right? Just bare minimum clothing, bare minimum things that he accumulated for his own living. Brahmacharya, he practiced brahmacharya also, calling his own wife his mother after a certain age and so on. Purushartha means self-effort. So he made his own cloth by spinning that wheel, right? So he just didn't criticize the British, but implemented, practiced what he preached to others. So he made his own cloth by Purushartha, self-reliance. Upavas, he conducted a lot of long fasts, also as a protest against the British. So all these ideas that we see, all these principles, Satya, Ahimsa, Aparigraha, Brahmacharya, Purushartha, and Upavas, are highly, highly popular in Jainism, especially in Jain ascetics, whose entire lives are based on these principles. This is what we see in Gandhi's life, inspired by Jain Guru Rajchand that he learned from from those letters that he wrote from South Africa. So Gandhi's life we see as an ecological treatise, a living ecosystem, because Gandhi's own food consisted of only small meals of nuts and fruits. So again, carbon footprint very, very low. His daily ablutions and bodily practices, he practiced yoga, meditation, and pranayama and so on. Naturopathy, enema, all those practices he had. His observances of silence, just like again, like Jain ascetics, Gandhi himself would practice these Maun Vrat. Hindu ascetics, Jain ascetics, Gandhi also practiced those. Morning walks, Jain ascetics, as we know, do not ever ride on any vehicle. Walking is their only ways of moving around. Gandhi also practiced these morning walks, which became like his meditation. He would respond to all his letters that he was receiving from all over the world. He would respond while walking. So walking was a very preferred practice by Gandhi also. Cultivation of the small with the big. He would take care of a small animal also, even in the midst of all the big issues, national issues. He would just first find time to take care of an animal, so small with a big. Spinning wheel we talked about. Abhorrence of waste, a small piece of pencil also was important for Gandhi, and he demonstrated that in his life. So today the moralists, non-violent activists, feminists, journalists, social reformers, trade union leaders, peasants, prohibitionists, nature cure lovers, renouncers, environmentalists, all take their inspiration from Gandhi's life. So one life, but many, many messages across the spectrum of all kinds of people. Is Jainism and non-violence in various eras. So non-violence of coming from Buddhism and probably Jainism also influenced Ashoka, and he constructed these large edicts across India, even in present-day Afghanistan, Gujarat. I've seen myself Ashoka's edict in Gujarat and also in Odisha, where non-violence is highly celebrated. Do not hunt or do not kill animals. Sacred groves were created across India. Here is a map of all kinds of sacred groves that exist across India, where not even a twig, not even a branch of a tree can be cut. So that non-violence towards animals and plants. Ashoka's grandfather and grandson, it is believed that they both renounced their kingdoms and adopted Jainism and then lived a Jain life. Ashoka's grandfather, that is Chandragupta Maurya, and his grandson as well. Then Gurjar King Siddharaja and his successor Kumarpal also embraced Jainism and practiced non-violence across their kingdom, across their empire. Then Muhammad Tughlaq, Akbar and Jahangir were also influenced by Jainism. Akbar famously received Jain monks in his court in Delhi, in Agra most likely, and he declared some days to be non-violent days, vegetarian days. Akbar himself did, and Jahangir also received Jain monks in his court, and they welcomed Jain ideas of non-violence. All right, then next slide. But what Jains are doing today? Unfortunately, some Jains you do find today in industries that lead to pollutions. You find them, some Jains, in strip mining or we see all kinds of wastage of resources. But on the other hand, Jains are still supporting many, many thousands of cattle sanctuaries across India, where sick or old cattle or other animals are treated and taken care of by donations from Jains and also by Hindus. You also find a bird hospital in Delhi, in Chandni Chowk, which I visited myself, where birds are treated again as a token of gratitude, a token of non-violence compassion towards birds. So all these things we find supported by Jains even today. Then we have Goa's largest wildlife sanctuary was named after Mahavir, Bhagwan Mahavir. Pinjar poles I talked about. Beef ban, Jains are very active in promoting beef ban across India. Bird hospital in Delhi I talked about. Then in Maharashtra, many temples such as in Dahanu are now going solar, so again to reduce their carbon footprint, reduce their dependence on fossil fuel. In Dilwara, Rajasthan, and many other temples in across India, we find more and more Jain temples that are avoiding fossil fuel and going for solar energy. In Khichan village in Rajasthan, near Jodhpur, Jains are famous in supporting or welcoming crane that come from Siberia all the way from Siberia. Thousands of these cranes are completely supported, fed by Jains in that village. So that village has become very popular now these days as a tourist spot because of this compassion towards these birds coming from Siberia. Another example of this animal compassion. And then Jain diaspora outside India are interested in de-emphasizing rituals or asceticism, non-sectarianism, interfaith efforts, and more meditation. They promote vegetarianism and animal rights. Environmentalism has become more socio-centric. Instead of going for moksha, it becomes more socio-centric. And ecologization of the Namina story, that animal compassion and how he leaves his wedding procession and becomes a monk. That story is gaining more popularity outside India as a token of, again, environmental teachings. And more examples, more temples and more Jains in the US supporting these animal-friendly teachings of Jainism. For example, supporting cattle sanctuaries in the US, in Colorado, Michigan, Vegetarian Society of Washington, DC, in New York Cattle Sanctuary, and youth are doing similar things for animals and birds. That's it. And so that completes our discussion on Jainism and ecology, and we'll continue with more.